Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward pathway had been lost. That is the first line, written in the first person, because it happened to me.
What is the Divine Comedy?
It is not one book, it is three. Inferno, Purgatorio, Paradiso. Hell, Purgatory, and Heaven. Together, a single journey. I wrote it in Italian, not Latin. That was a deliberate provocation. Learned men wrote in Latin. I wrote in the language of merchants, of women, of the streets, because I wanted the streets to read it. I called it simply La Commedia, the comedy, not because it is funny, though there are moments. In the classical tradition, a tragedy begins well and ends in ruin. A comedy begins in darkness and ends in light. My poem begins in a dark forest and ends with a vision of God. That is a comedy in the only sense that matters. The word divine was added after my death, by admirers. I had no objection from where I was. It is a poem of 100 cantos, written in a form I built myself, 3 lines at a time, interlocking like chains. Every group of 3 echoing the Holy Trinity. The structure itself is a theology. And it begins, as all great journeys begin, with a man who is lost.
Where were you when you wrote this?
In exile, banned from Firenze under threat of death. I had served my city, fought in their wars, held their highest offices, and then the wrong political faction won, backed by the Pope himself, and I was condemned for crimes I did not commit, and told never to return. I never did. I died in Ravenna 20 years later, still an exile. Firenze only apologized in 2008, 7 centuries after the fact. Better late than never, I guess. I said the poem in the year 1300, before my exile, technically. I was 35 years old, half of the biblical lifespan of 70, Midway, and I had lost everything I believed in, my city, my politics, my place in the world. I wrote my way out of that darkness, over 20 years, finishing the last pages weeks before I died. You are the main character of your own poem. How does that work? There are 2 of me in this poem. There is the pilgrim, the man walking through hell, who is afraid, who weeps, who sometimes faints from what he sees. And there is the poet, the man writing it all down, years later, who already knows how the journey ends. The pilgrim does not know. He stumbles, he makes mistakes. In the second circle of hell, he meets 2 lovers, condemned for adultery, Francesca and Paolo, and she tells their story with such beauty that he collapses. He faints from compassion for a sinner. The poet lets that happen, because the poet knows that sympathy for sin is itself a temptation. He's showing you, through the pilgrim's mistake, how seductive the wrong things can be. That distance between who I was on the journey and who I became by writing it, that gap is where the poem lives. How does the journey begin? I am in a dark forest. 3 beasts block my path, a leopard, a lion, a she-wolf. Sin in its 3 forms, self-indulgence, violence, malice. And I cannot move forward alone. Then a figure appears, Virgil, the greatest Roman poet, dead for more than 1,000 years. He says, I have been sent to guide you. We will descend into hell, then climb through purgatory, and at the end, someone greater than I will take you the rest of the way. Why Virgil? Because he represents the highest a human mind can reach through reason alone. He was my master. I had read him so many times I knew his lines by heart. But reason alone cannot reach God. That is the limit built into Virgil's nature and into ours. He lived before Christ. He knew the truth as far as a man can know it without revelation, and no further, which is why, at the threshold of paradise, he will have to stop. What do you find in hell? 9 circles, each one deeper, darker, colder than the last. And in each circle, souls. Real people. People I knew, people from history, biblical figures, my enemies, and one pope in particular, Pope Boniface VIII, the man who engineered my exile. He summoned me to Rome on a diplomatic mission, then deliberately detained me there, while his ally invaded Firenze, destroyed my party, and condemned me in absentia. He was still alive when I wrote the Inferno, no matter. I placed him in hell anyway, in the 8th circle, among those who sold sacred offices for money, buried headfirst in rock, feet burning. I did not wait for God's judgment on Bonifacio. I rendered my own. Some call that arrogance. I called it precision. But I want to be clear about something. My rage was not against the church. It was against men who betrayed it. I believed in the church as an institution of God. What I could not endure was watching men of God act as men of power, using the sacred for the political, the spiritual for the personal. Bonifacio did not fail because he was pope. He failed because he was a man who forgot what the office meant. The principle governing every punishment in hell is called contrapasso. The suffering mirrors the sin precisely, not as cruelty, as revelation. The fortune tellers who try to see the future walk with their heads permanently twisted backward, so now they can only see behind them. The lustful are swept forever by violent winds, because they surrendered reason to passion, and now they are driven by the wind, with no ground beneath them, no direction, no end. The punishment is the sin, made visible and eternal. And the deepest circle is not fire. Everyone imagines hell as fire. The deepest circle is ice. At the very center, Lucifer, frozen, enormous, weeping. And in his free mouths, free traitors, the worst sinners in human history, chewed without end. Treachery is the gravest sin, because it corrupts love. And love, for me, is the force that moves everything. And purgatory, what changes there? Everything. In hell, nothing moves. The souls are fixed in their sin forever. They cannot change, cannot hope, cannot choose differently. In purgatory, they climb. They suffer, yes, but the suffering has a direction. It is going somewhere. A great translator of Purgatory once said, "Those other books have a finality I found less attractive. The Purgatorio is more like life." He was right. And there is something in the Purgatorio that I did not fully plan. It revealed itself as I wrote. It is the only realm where there is art, music, poetry, sculpture. The Inferno has none. Beauty cannot exist where hope is absent. Paradise has none either, not because it lacks beauty, but because what is there transcends anything art could hold. Art is a human instrument. It exists in the space between where we are and where we long to be. Only in purgatory, where souls still suffer, still climb, still hope, does art appear. Because only there are they still human enough to need it. And then we arrive at the summit, the Garden of Eden. And there Virgil leaves me. He has taken me as far as reason can go. And Beatrice appears. Who is Beatrice? A woman I loved my entire life. I met her when I was 9 years old. I spoke to her perhaps twice. She died at 24. I never recovered. In the poem, she guides me through paradise. She represents what Virgil cannot: divine love, revelation, grace. She takes me where reason cannot reach. She was also real. The grief was real. And the poem is, among everything else it is, the record of a man who loved something he could not hold, and built the entire architecture of the cosmos to honor it. What happens at the end, in paradise? I ascend through 9 celestial spheres, planets, stars, angels. The light intensifies with each one, and at the very end, the Empyrean, the presence of God. I try to describe what I saw, and the language fails. Not because I lacked the words, I spent my life finding words, but because what I saw was beyond what words were made to carry. The Inferno I could describe precisely. The punishments have edges, shapes, names, but paradise kept defeating my words. The closer I came to God, the less language could hold it. The last lines of the entire poem say, "Here high fantasy lost its impulse, but my will and desire were already propelled, as a wheel is equally moved, by the love that moves the sun and other stars." What is the one thing someone should understand after reading this? That the journey is possible. The whole journey, not just the descent. Hell is a portrait of what a soul looks like when it has stopped moving, when it has chosen a scene and made it permanent. The souls in my inferno are not imprisoned from outside. They are exactly what they chose to become. They are not being punished by God. They are living, eternally, in the consequence of their own choices. Purgatory is the portrait of a soul still in motion, still capable of becoming something different. The pain is real, but it has direction, and direction changes everything. And paradise is not a reward for the virtuous. It is the destination of the transformed, of those who descended, who climbed, who allowed themselves to be changed by what they saw. The 3 books are not 3 places. They are 3 conditions of the soul, and you can live in any of them before you die. I have known men who walked the earth in hell.
I have known others who were already, quietly, ascending.
The poem does not ask you to locate yourself in the afterlife. It asks you to locate yourself right now. In which book is your life being written? And if it is not yet the third, what would it take to begin the climb?
Why should someone read the Divine Comedy today?
Because you have been in that forest. Everyone has. Midway through something, a life, a faith, a marriage, a purpose, and suddenly the straight path is gone, and you do not know how you got there. The poem does not tell you the forest was a mistake. It tells you the forest was the beginning. You cannot reach the stars without first descending. And it tells you, do not go alone. Find your Virgil. Whatever form that guide takes, a teacher, a book, a faith, a person who knows the terrain, no one makes this journey unaccompanied. I should also say this. I wrote the poem in the language of the people because I wanted it to reach everyone, not just scholars. That decision shaped the Italian language itself for 7 centuries. There is a man called Shakespeare who did something similar for English 300 years after me. I am told he did it rather well. The church that Bonifacio corrupted and that exiled me through his hand has since called this poem one of the greatest expressions of Christian faith ever written. Pope John Paul II, himself a poet, cited the Paradiso as a doctrinal source in his own apostolic letters. He described my work as a vision of reality that speaks of the life to come and the mystery of God with the vigor of theological thought, transformed by the combined splendor of art and poetry. A pope quoting me to teach theology. Bonifacio, as far as I know, remains where I left him. Read it because it is the most ambitious map of the human soul ever put into poetry. And because after 7 centuries, the map still works. The Divine Comedy was written in exile and finished weeks before I died. I never saw Firenze again, but I saw everything else.